Hi, this is Don McAllister, and welcome to another edition of Screencasts Online. There are two topics in this week's show. The first looking at the new requirement for compulsory two-factor authentication by Apple from the 15th of June, as well as a look at the changes to Apple's spreadsheet application Numbers. Firstly, let's take a look at two-factor authentication for your Apple ID. A number of people have received emails from Apple advising them of the need to switch to two-factor authentication if people use third-party apps that access iCloud data. Now, these apps include third-party email, clients, calendar and contact apps such as Outlook, Thunderbird, Fantastical, BusyCal and many more. Rather than allowing your third-party apps to use your standard iCloud password to authenticate, each app will need a separately generated app-specific password to connect to your iCloud services. I have covered this before, but with this compulsory deadline of the 15th of June, I thought I'd review the current arrangements and demonstrate what you need to set up to allow two-factor authentication on an existing iCloud account.